Good afternoon and welcome back to By Any Means Necessary. I'm your host, Melvin Thompson, the Executive Director of the Endeleo Institute. We are the nonprofit arm of Trinity United Church of Christ, located at 400 West 95th Street in the beautiful community of Washington Heights. We welcome you back for another tasty show of By Any Means Necessary. We have another wonderful, outstanding, all-star guest. We have just had a string of wonderful guests in the last several weeks, as well as farmers markets. We support our farmers market through a USDA grant. Our market is located on 95th and Normal, and here is our wonderful flyer that tells you the details. We started July 8th. Earlier this summer, and we go all the way through September 30th. We're here at 8 o'clock in the morning on Saturdays from 8 o'clock to 1 p.m. And please, as you know what I'm about to say, you've got to get there early because our farmers are selling out. I just looked at our report earlier today, and 3 of the 5 farmers that were there last week completely sold out within an hour and a half. And so please come out early. Things are starting to harvest in a major way, so we're really excited about that, and there's more variety. Of course, our other African American vendors are enjoying success as well. So I mean, it's just a wonderful way to see the dollars circulate in our community a lot longer than the given times that we've been told. And so we're just excited about what's coming out of these different markets and the people that are associated with them. Last week we had an entrepreneur, we had a chef the week before, and there are just so many things emanating from food, and it's not surprising that that's happening because food, I mean, where do most folks get together? In the kitchen, right? To talk about the issues that are affecting us. And so out of this farmers market, things and ideas are coming forth. We just talked about a commercial kitchen that is on the drawing board at our church. We have an underutilized commercial kitchen that we're looking at now. And so we've got aspiring chefs that you met, Chef Maria, a couple of weeks ago, and she's excited about the possibility of sharing space and a shared kitchen space. And this is only going to generate dollars and give people who otherwise wouldn't have an opportunity to do something entrepreneurial like this. And so it's a platform for Endeleo to be a conduit to these kind of opportunities. And so we're very thankful that we have this grant to do these kind of things. I want to tell you about, before I introduce our first guest, I want to tell you I am a thrift shopper, and I am likely to be in a thrift store 2 or 3 times a week. I love the idea of authentic things that were made years and years ago and still have relevance today. It's economically and socially conscious to do, wouldn't you say? Yes. And so I came across something that really struck me, and I knew that we were going to have the guest that we have today. I'm going to show you a book that I came across, and I want you to take a look and see. It's called I Want to Be, and this book was just sitting in a shopping cart right on top for me to see as I walked past. And I opened the book, and the book was written by Dexter and I believe Olivia. What was their names? Oh, Dexter and Patricia Oliver, back in 1974. And what this book is basically is an alphabetized career book. So from A to Z, they simply wrote what potential occupations African Americans could aspire to. And so from A, there was actually architect, B was botanist, Z was zookeeper, and it was just a zoologist or something like that. And it was just amazing that in 1974, almost what? I don't think you were. Were you?
I was not.
See, I'm showing my age. I think I was around, so I'm not going to tell you. But that is amazing. And so what struck me was under the letter U was the occupation for urban planner. And that's exactly what the gentleman to my right is, an urban planner. And I have long since been in the real estate development, in the community development business. The last 10 years of my life, and I've worked with several urban planners, and most of them, unfortunately, do not look like me, and they do not reflect the communities that I work in and I seek to build or rebuild. And so it was refreshing to be introduced to an African American man that is in this field doing incredible work. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to Donald Hugher, who is and correct me if I'm wrong, but you are the senior urban planner at the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning.
Associate planner, so I mean,
okay,
doesn't
well,
really matter, but
okay, it doesn't really matter, but welcome, brother.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And so tell us, Don, you're a Chicago native, but you are recently returned back to Chicago. Tell us, what your journey has been and how you got to this point.
So I guess where my story begins, I grew up in a housing project. I was low income and everything like that, and I always sought to do something different for my community. And I followed the path of a lot of people did. Go to high school, and you think that when you get out of high school you can find a job immediately, and that's kind of the path at that time. And so when I did not find work, I kind of went from dead end job to dead end job, and tried to understand why I couldn't get traction in the larger economy. And so when I start to look around, you realize that other people in your community are jobless like you, or going from dead end job to dead end job, and you start to ask the question why. And so when exploring that kind of question, it was sociological initially. So my path started in sociology, just to understand why so many people in certain areas were unemployed. So many people, so many businesses were disinvested, and you see a lot of rundown homes and things like that. And so that kind of led me in urban planning, where you could actually do something about those conditions that exist there. And so, having read a lot of theorists in sociology like W.B. Du Bois, who talked about these these conditions, it was surprising that in 2006 it was still reading about things that he had written about in 1906. And so, sure. It's kind of I saw that there was still a challenge there, and so I sought to do something about that. So I kind of just progressed and try to seek opportunities to do community revitalization. Did a lot of community revitalization work back in Texas before I moved back here, and now with the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, we do a lot of community work, not so much in low-income communities, but we do some of that work as well. But it's like a lot of technical assistance that we provide for local organizations.
And we've been the recipient of that technical assistance, and it's been invaluable. As you know, Kendra Smith was, I think, a project manager before she took another opportunity, and she connected us over this summer. And I can tell you that the value of the technical assistance. Hold that thought. We have a caller. Go ahead, caller, with your question or comment.
Yes, I have a question. Maybe relative. I hope I ain't going too far in left field.
Okay.
Are you familiar with the new Kenny King campus?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Okay. When you look at that campus and how things was planned, that was $300 million that was it took to build that campus. And right now, it's like a big white elephant. And when you look at the old Kenny King campus, and I can't help but think when that campus, I think it was cost something like $40 million, and we look and see how it was planned. It was beautifully designed, but it was not well kept at all. And if I understand things correctly, when you do have certain buildings, they have inspectors that come in, especially when it's public property, they inspect certain public property. Now, how the heck, when that old campus, they literally just fall apart, and when we look at the new campus right now, I just got to mention, $300 million.
Sure.
And the campus is already falling apart, and the community is not really benefiting from it at all. It's already, and the roof is already leaking.
Wow.
And can you explain how the people sit back and they plan things, let things like that just fall apart?
Well,
and
well,
we the
well, thank
taxpayers
you,
pay
thank
for
you
that.
so much for that comment, and that's very insightful of you to make that comment, because those are some of the things. Sometimes we're not at those tables, we're not at those planning tables when those things commence, and maybe you can share a little bit about what goes into a project of that magnitude.
Well, a project like that, I mean, you do a lot of capital improvement planning. The city probably did some work with that along those lines. Probably talk with the community, the city colleges, and have those conversations. Sometimes you lay out capital, you lay out projects, and on the front end you have the resources to build that. Maybe you got a grant, or maybe you have resources to actually build the physical infrastructure. But sometimes budgets don't last for the upkeep of those properties. I'm not exactly familiar with the exact Kenny King project and why you have it's say it's falling apart. At the same time, there's challenges with the overall budget in a lot of places. And so I think one important thing that you and I talked about is that to build something and then to sustain it are two different conversations. And that's the challenge with a lot of communities, that you build something and it's not necessarily it's planned for 20 years and obsolescence and beyond. And so when you replace things, if you don't put the same care into planning for the future of that property, it can run into some of the same challenges.
And it's interesting that the caller makes those observations, and it sounds like he's quite knowledgeable of the process of the first project and then the second project. How important is input from the community perspective as those projects are even planned, and how much input is actually taken and utilized from the community?
So, as part of the process, any process that I've worked on, community input is vital, like absolutely essential. But, one of the challenges is getting people to show up. It's one thing to have a planning process where you do stakeholder engagement. When you have a meeting and you have, sometimes we'll have several meetings and people don't show up. I think that's the critical point. Like, if you want to have a say in it, you have to show up to the meeting. Then if that feedback was not received, then that's another question. But sometimes it's just getting people to come to a meeting. A community of 200,000 people might only have 200 people show up. So
sure.
That's a very small percentage of the total population. And so then you come on the other side of this and you ask the question why. Well, if your impact would have been your input would have been vital to the planning of the project.
You said something interesting about you grew up in public housing, and you were motivated and you were diligent in pursuing how you could change things and change conditions in your community. I mentioned in the green room that I had attended a UIC presentation about 3 years ago, and the UIC had probably 25 to 3,000 African American students and their parents in the audience, and these were people who had been accepted into the university but had not yet committed to the university. And one of the strong programs at UIC is their urban planning program. And so at the end of their presentation, they broke off into certain groups, and the urban planning group was what piqued my interest. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to that presentation because I want to hear and I want to see the young people and I want to see the questions that they ask. Do you know that no one entered that room? I was the only person in that room. So inevitably, the presenters did the program for me solely, and that was very telling. And so what I want to ask you is, do we even understand this field of study? Do we understand this occupation? If you asked a young person today, what is urban planning, would they actually know?
Very often they don't know, and it's not any. There's no criticism or
Sure.
A detriment to. I mean, it comes at a detriment at times, but it's important that people know what it is. So often, people see the end result of a project. So you go to the city planner after the fact, after the cranes already arrived. But this process takes it may have taken 2 years before that point to actually happen. And so we need to be informed and know about these kind of things that are going on, and actually know that you can be involved in this process. And if when you see an affordable housing project or the development coming in, and there's so many no's, all the no's show at the meeting, but the yeses don't come.
Yes,
it's because of these reasons. You wonder why it doesn't change. Well, you have to show up. I think this is vital that people get involved in this process. But to answer your question, people don't know. People aren't really involved with the affairs of at the point when they can make an intervention, by understanding what the process is and understanding what planning is and how that informs mostly the built environment.
And the detriment of that is the fact that who better to glean information from? Hold that thought, caller. You got a question or a comment? Please go ahead.
I sure do. Great show as usual.
Thank you.
But what you talk about the White House being run down, but they're not fixing the roof for leaks. They're fixing it to get all them wiretaps out of there, all them bugs, that are holding information. All them leaks are coming out. So it's a good reason to say, it's the rain. But that's not why they're doing it. It's to try to get all them bugs out of there. And maybe the leaking will stop. I don't know. I doubt it. But what else could they do? Thank you.
Thank you so much, and it's all the more reason. And one of the things the caller mentions about leaks and things that are wrong. Who better to know a community than the people who live there? Right. I mean, it's one of the things that we've done at Endeleo. One of the things that your agency does and does well, I think, is the Future Leaders in Planning program, which is short FLIP. Stands for Future Leaders in Planning, and every year for the last 3 summers, we have engaged at least 2 young people to go into that program. I think it's a week long where they get a chance to go out of their neighborhoods and visit other communities and actually talk to professionals in the field of urban planning to see how they actually put plans together, how they get community outreach. And so we're doing our part because whenever a big project or something comes online, I think that's a wonderful opportunity to engage young people about the prospects of actually working in the field beyond the project itself. And so that's something that we I think it is so vital that we get involved at the ground, at the grassroots level, so we're not looking over the fence when all the work is starting to happen and we're saying, well, who told me? Because I know when we had our final meeting at the Woodson Library, when CMAP unveiled their technical assistance report, there were folks in the audience that said, well, who did you talk to? Who did you, and to your point about, getting folks to come out. And some of the questions were, well, I wasn't asked. And so, how do you, deal with that at the end of the project when you've been working, the last 18 months to get this and try to get as much input as possible. It's a really difficult task. And go ahead, share.
I was just going to share, like you talked about, introducing young people to planning, getting folks out there and letting them know about the process where these things happen. Looking at multi-layered approaches to, getting the word out there about meetings. Like you really have to. Some communities, you engage differently. You have to go to, sometimes you have to go to churches, you have to go to barbershops, you have to put a flyer on a pole. You might be able to send out an email blast, whatever it takes to get people to show up. But I say, people need to show up. And like I said, we need to plant good seeds. And young people, and especially in communities of color, communities are disinvested. That's crucial because they are the ones who are going to have to go back and change. If you care about your community, you have to get involved in the process, and you have to know when to come out and when to voice your opinion and let your voice be heard.
Absolutely. This is a live call-in show. You can call us at 312-738-1060. That's 312-738-1060. I couldn't agree with you more about the different methodologies of reaching folks and where you have to go. And oftentimes when folks don't look like us and they represent urban planning, we've got a caller. Go ahead with your question or comment, caller.
Good evening, Jim. I was the first caller. A lot of times, in order to get people involved in different types of community involvement, a lot of times you got to give them some type of reward or some type of money. Because I know a lot of times I have gone over to the University of Chicago when they have done different types of clinical research, and when they give people like $25 or $40 a shame that you had to do that, or you give the children some type of McDonald's coupon. You take this research, take this form, the questionnaire home,
Sure.
and you get this coupon from McDonald's. It seems like that's the way some people had to do in order to get people involved in the community, in community involvement stuff.
What an excellent point. Thank you so much, because that's exactly what we do as an organization. There's always, I mean, whether it's just food, a coupon, a gift certificate, and you're right. It's kind of ironic that you have to do that to get folks to come out to participate in their own community healing. We've got another caller. Go right ahead.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, you're having a very interesting guest and conversation here, and I'm so glad you brought on a urban planner. I had a buddy who was an urban planner for the city of Chicago, and I see a lot of great things that he did, coming from a similar background that your guest is coming from.
Sure.
He inspired me even, and I noticed also with the Obama Presidential Center, that was one of the things that was mentioned, you know, the aftercare and how it's going to be maintained, or, you know, sustained financially.
Absolutely. That is a great, and you know, that is the biggest, I mean, that is a monstrosity of a project, and you see that there are organizations. I know Big in Green is one of the major nonprofits down in the Woodline. I know Naomi Davis very well, and she's fighting and clawing to get input into that project, so that we, you know, as a community can gather around something that's culturally relevant to us. And so the planning for that is going to be critical. I mean, and we've got time, because I don't think that comes online for another 4 years, but we need seats at the table, and we need impact, and urban planning is exactly that. That's just not going to come online. That's going to be something that has to be planned and well thought out, and there needs to be community input. And I noticed that they are doing sessions at different universities and the South Shore Cultural Center to do that. But again, that's an opportunity. That's a occupational or aspirational opportunity for our young people to get involved, and not just for that particular project, but a teaching moment for young people who are looking for areas that they can make an impact in their own community. I'm just grateful we're getting so many calls about this, because this undergirds how our communities will look for what? How long does planning?
I mean, the time horizon on this, you know, this library is something that will last, you know, we're talking about 50 years out. Like, people will be looking at this, you know, project and saying, you know, what, you know, how this get here, and, you know, I'm trying to understand how they interact with it. You know, if we plant, you know, like I said, you plant good seeds, you get good trees. You think about the youth right now, and they're going to impact what happens with this project later on, 50 years down the road. I'm glad you've done the work with the Woodson Library, because you've come back to your community, and you've forced, not forced, but essentially encouraged investment, you know, from the larger community to come back and do something about the condition of that library when you saw that it was in poor condition.
And I made sure that, thank you for saying that, and I made sure that the community led that, because I'm getting calls every day about how teary-eyed I'm getting, Melvin, just seeing what's coming, and the renovations and the improvements to something that was already there, that we didn't know how to go about changing, right? And so we just put that together, and those things can be replicated all across the city. Absolutely, and just improving what's already there, not necessarily bringing in something new, but just having a voice. And I think going forward, that library is going to be a shining example of what's possible, and planning begins there. I know we always run out of time when, you know, we get into a really good topic, and so I'm going to have you back, Don. And
I'd love to come back.
Yeah, this is wonderful. And you've been watching By Any Greens Necessary. We are certainly at the farmers market for the next 6 or 7 weeks. Please come out, enjoy the beautiful food, the beautiful weather, the San Diego-like weather, and we will be there at 8 o'clock Saturday morning. Come on out and join us next week for another riveting show on By Any Greens Necessary.